I've been given this opportunity, like, don't fuck it up, Maria, like, just run with it and, try and create a business that people really enjoy being part of and want to be part of and want to succeed with it.
For most of her career, Maria Sinclair didn't see herself as a leader.
I just turned 50 this year. So I've actually got to a point in life where I know I'm all right at what I do. Well, I say all right. I know I'm good at what I do and I should have a bit more belief in it, but it's taken me a long time to get to that point. And I think the people around you are so important in that. And recruitment can be really cutthroat.
Yet today, she's the Managing Director of Cobalt, one of the UK's top 50 recruitment firms. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened in a moment of crisis. In that period, she showed herself what everyone else had already seen for years, that she was ready to lead.
I think I'm super lucky that I've stayed with the same business, apart from a brief hiatus in 2009 because the world kind of crashed around us, that I think I've always worked for people that have been very supportive, but also super fun individuals to be with outside of work. And I think in this job, you need that because, when the highs are highs, they're great. When the lows are lows, it's bloody brutal.
During lockdown with 45 colleagues furloughed and the market in free fall, Maria picked up multiple desks and held the operation together and discovered a level of capability she didn't fully own until then. That experience became the foundation for the leader she is today.
Really good talent is hard to find, and you want to retain people. And the way to do that is to create that culture where people feel like they can be open about where they're at.
I'm Mark Whitby, and you're listening to The Resilient Recruiter. In this episode, we're going to get into how Maria thinks about creating a healthy, high-performing environment, how she supports her people.
I always try and impart, be patient.
Yeah.
Yes, we would like you to bill. But if it doesn't happen within, the first 3 months or not the first 6 months, but, you're getting there. As long as we can see that you're doing what we are asking you to do, we know that it will come.
And the mindset that helps her lead through uncertainty. All right, Maria, great to meet you. Thank you for doing this.
No, lovely to meet you too, Mark. Thanks for inviting me along.
We found Cobalt because you're 49th in the Hot 100 list published by Recruiter magazine, so you're in the top 50 recruitment businesses in the UK based
We're in the right
on,
half.
how efficient and profitable. So they rank you based on GP per employee, which is a really interesting metric that really all business owners and directors should pay attention to. And then we checked out your LinkedIn profile and we thought, oh, she would be awesome to have on the show. So I'm glad that we managed to attract you to do it.
Thank you. No, thanks for inviting me. It's the first time I've done one of these, so I promise I'll try not to swear along the way. But apologies if I do.
Yeah, no, don't censor yourself because recruiters, tend to swear a lot anyway, I've noticed. Maybe it's just the British ones. Here's a question for the audience, because we had this debate in our team the other day. Do American recruiters swear as much as British recruiters, or are they offended? Let us know the answer to that question if you have an opinion on that. I'd be interested to know
that, actually. I don't think I've ever heard any of my colleagues in Germany or the US actually use many expletives. I think it's when I get nervous that I tend to say the wrong thing and then it comes out and then and by the time you've said it, it's like, oh my God. And then there's a string of other expletives that come along after it. So the quarterly meetings with me are normally fun because technology, I'm literally a Luddite. I mean, I barely know how to turn my laptop on. So the fact that I'm mastering the art of doing presentations and obviously having to be doing them even more so now in a leadership role, I think I'm trying to censor myself a little bit so that I'm not as potty mouthed as I used to be.
All right. Well, whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to keep this clean, then that's fine. But if a few swear words come out, it's not a problem. You went to university in Bolton. Are you from there or?
No, I'm from a place called Lytham St Anne's. So I'm from the northwest. Lytham's in Lancashire. It's just outside of Blackpool. So a lot of people will know Blackpool.
Definitely. Yeah.
Bolton at the time wasn't a university. I think it only got university accreditation maybe 15 years ago. It was a college. I was probably someone who struggled at secondary school. Academic, but not top of the class. Had to work really, really hard to get good grades. Didn't have a huge amount of confidence as a teenager. Was not part of the cool kids, wasn't at the other end, was somewhere in the middle, and had no sort of real sense of knowing what I wanted to do, other than the fact that I had a really good work ethic. So I've always worked. When I was like 12, I was working in my auntie's hair salon on a weekend, like sweeping up hair and washing people's hair. And then I very quickly, obviously working in a town that is fed by tourism, pub jobs. So, collecting glasses. And then when I was old enough, well, actually, I think I was illegal when I started working behind a bar, as in I wasn't of a legal age to be serving alcohol. But yeah, bar work, shop work, basically anything where I could make money. So I think I got to GCSEs and had no real aspiration of what I wanted to do, other than thought I wanted to be a PE teacher because I was really into sport. I was pretty sporty. It was the one thing that I did excel at. And then I got to A levels and I absolutely bombed. Like, they were horrific. The one I needed to, I think, to go and do teach training because I wanted to go, and I was looking into sports, to being a PE teacher. I needed to get I needed a science degree, and I absolutely bombed. I came away with my A level in English Lit, which I nailed, but the sciences eluded me, and I think it hit me quite hard that I had no idea what I was going to go and do next. So I went back and resat my A levels and my GCSE maths, actually, because I was abominable at that. And I did 2 years in one, and I did psychology, which I really enjoyed. I did the AS level, and I came away from that and I thought, okay, I think I might quite like to do something with this, but still had no sort of real clear direction. So was looking at universities, wasn't sort of really that engaged in it, and then decided to go traveling for 12 months. So at the age
Awesome.
of, I think I was 17 when I went, which was a big thing.
So I've got a daughter who's 21 and a son who's 18, and I would be nervous about either of them like going off traveling the world for 12 months. I think my daughter, like she's been away at uni, and she's quite mature and street smart, but I would still be worried.
Yeah, I think the confidence thing with that actually led me to not being overly truthful with my parents about what I was doing. So they thought I was going backpacking through Europe for 3 months and that I would be back in the new year, when the reality was I'd bought a round the world ticket and I was starting in Europe, but I was finishing in the US and then coming back to the UK, and I was going to be away for 12 months. So that got broke. That news got broke to them, I think, 4 weeks before I went on the trip.
Oh my.
But I saved really hard. I was doing like 3 jobs. I was a postwoman. Was the only girl actually in the sorting office delivering mail. So I did that. I was working in a care home, and then I was also working in the local pub where I'd had a job for years. And I just, saved all the money, bought the ticket, and I spent a year traveling. So I lived in Australia for, I think, just under 9 months it was, and then I bookended that with time in Thailand, and then time in the US, and then came back to the UK. And during that period, my mum actually was doing the hard yards and trying to find me somewhere to go and do my degree in psychology, and that was where we ended up at Bolton. Sorry, that was a long-winded way of telling you that, but
yeah, no, but I'm glad we did. So, by the way, I'm hoping that my listeners are smart enough to get this. Like, these aren't just random questions that I'm asking, which are irrelevant, because it's interesting. Now you've ended up in a leadership role with a very successful, fast-growing company, and like what I'm looking for is, what are the clues like that you are going to take this path? Because if you run a recruitment business, it's always one of the biggest challenges I hear is ironically, it's hard to find good people, like for us internally, right?
Yeah.
To hire. And you've checked a few boxes. So it's super interesting that you weren't the most confident in school, but there was a couple of things that, like the hard work, that's a big check there, right? Because this is a hard job. And if you are not prepared to work hard, especially in the early beginning part of your career, then it's probably not going to work out.
Yeah.
The second thing was your sporty background. So like that shows competitiveness. And then the third thing is traveling around the world at 17 shows that you're willing to really get outside your comfort zone and like push yourself and challenge yourself. So those three big checks in the box there, Maria, if I'm looking for a recruitment consultant to join my team. So that leads nice. We started in recruitment around the same time, actually. And so you actually joined Cobalt as a recruitment consultant and then worked your way up and are now managing director. So why did you, so 23 years at one company is a long time.
Yeah, so I've actually been in recruitment for, I think it's 28 years in total.
Oh, okay.
So I started in 99. And so I came back from traveling, went and did the degree, was still working all the way through degree. So I worked for I was one of those really annoying women that would stand in like Boots, the chemist, and spray people with perfume, when they would, try this fragrance.
Oh, yeah.
And I did that on a weekend, and then I ended up getting approached by Clarins to go and work on counter. So actually for the first 5 years of me working in recruitment, or was it 4 years? It's probably 4 years because it coincided with PSD. I still had a weekend role. I was still doing, because I love skincare. I'm obsessed with it. If I wasn't a recruitment consultant, I'd be working in the beauty industry. That is for sure. And I loved that role so much that I kept going with it, because I think that was a massive leveler for me in actually building confidence in talking to people very openly. Because you get a lot of people coming to you on counter asking for advice, wanting to understand what's going to work for them, what's not going to work for them. Some people being unconfident in themselves anyway. So, the power of skincare and makeup, particularly as a woman, can be quite a leveler.
So let me just press pause here. So if you're outside the UK, Boots is a pharmacy chain, probably the biggest pharmacy chain. So you worked in the beauty department at Boots on the weekend while working full-time as a recruiter.
Yeah. So I got a job. It just sounds like I've had a litany of jobs, to be fair. But when I was at uni, I got a job as a customer service advisor with the Royal Bank of Scotland, who are obviously one of the big national banking chains. And I kept that role on during the week. And then on the weekend, I was working at Boots on the Clarins counter. And then when I finished my degree, I settled in Manchester. I was really happy. I didn't want to move back to Lytham. Lytham's a great place, but it's a small town. Manchester is a big city. And at that point was, going through a lot of change, and a really exciting place to be. So I was just living on the outskirts of the city centre. And again, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I don't think anyone sort of really chooses, comes out of uni thinking, I want to be a recruitment consultant. And I was looking in the Manchester Evening News for jobs. I'd been offered a job full time at the bank, and I was doing that, which was fine. But I'd seen this job for a company called PSD, and their advertising was just really impressive. And I think one of the things that hooked me was the fact that they had an office in New York. And as part of my traveling, I'd spent a bit of time in New York and was just like, fell in love with the city. And I was like, oh my God, I could go and work for a business that, would give me a chance to maybe go overseas at some point. And I applied and I got an interview, and then they rejected me. They actually rejected me 8 times.
Wait, how does that work?
I met with a chap called Peter Hardy, who was in charge of the real estate team at PSD, and still is. I'm pretty sure he's still with PSD, is Peter. And I met with him, and I got a very polite, call back saying, look, you're great, but just you don't have enough sales experience, direct sales experience. You need to go and get more. And I was like, okay. So I went and got more. I changed my role at the bank. I still kept on the Clarins role. Like, I was really focused on target driven metrics, and I kept in touch with them. Like, I kept mithering them because I really, really wanted to go and work for this company. I had no idea what they did, but I just really wanted to go and work for them. And then in the end, I think there'd been a change in the team structure, and they did an interview and they offered me a role, and that was how I got into recruitment, specifically into real estate recruitment. And even then, I still had no idea what I was going into. My understanding of real estate was that a chartered surveyor was someone that valued houses, not the brevity of the built environment as I know it to be. So it was a massive learning curve, but it was brilliant for me because the day I joined, the lady that I was supposed to be reporting into, who was a bit of a legend in the recruitment space, particularly in real estate, she decided to go and work for a competitor. So back then, the moment you said you were working for a competitor, you were out the door in the garden, key changes locked and everything. So the first day I turned up, I was literally, because I obviously started in recruitment where we sent things by fax. We had
I
a
remember.
secretary that typed all our letters. There was no email, there was no nothing. I was just given a thick piece of paper and given the phone and said, "There you go figure." And I was like, "What am I doing?" I mean, my line manager at the time is a lovely individual, but management skills weren't history. I mean, he was brilliant. I joined a team of people that were absolutely at the top of their game in property, and two of the team who were based in London were Adam and Tim, who left and set up Cobalt. So that was how I ended up at Cobalt, because I followed Adam and Tim across when they established their business, and Adam approached me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming to Manchester because they wanted to open a regional office, and I said yes. So that was how I ended up at Cobalt.
Okay, now that makes sense. So, and then here you are all this time later. What kept you so you've been with them since they were very small. And how many people have you got now? About
15, there were
40,
15
50?
people when I joined.
15, yeah.
And I think now globally, we must be touching just under 200, I'd say.
200, wow.
We're 32 heads in the UK. We're the smallest we've ever been in the UK, actually. But we're 32 heads in the UK. And then obviously we've got sort of the back office support on top of that. So it takes us a bit closer to kind of 35, 36. About 10 people in the US. And then the rest of our businesses, we've got a huge business in Germany, 7 offices over there. So it's the bigger concentration of the global workforce is obviously based in Germany.
Wow. So what has kept you there? How have you made that work over such a long period of time? And why did you stay?
The people, I think as I've got older, I've got better at pushing myself outside of my confidence zone and probably being a little bit less give a shit. But having good people around me that I felt could support me was super important to me because of that lack of confidence that I did carry into my 20s and 30s. And it's probably not until I hit my mid 40s, and I just turned 50 this year, that I've actually got to a point in life where I know I'm all right at what I do. Well, I say all right. I know I'm good at what I do, and I should have a bit more belief in it. But it's taken me a long time to get to that point. And I think the people around you are so important in that. And recruitment can be really cutthroat. I think I'm super lucky that I've stayed with the same business, apart from a brief hiatus in 2009 because the world kind of crashed around us. That I think I've always worked for people that have been very supportive, but also super fun individuals to be with outside of work. And I think in this job, you need that because, when the highs are highs, they're great. And when the lows are lows, it's bloody brutal. But for me, I think whenever anybody comes into Cobalt and they ask me that question, I'm almost like, we've never lost that small founder feel. That our 2 co-founders, one of whom very sadly passed away earlier this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They have always been very engaged in the business, and the senior leadership team above me in terms of the board are the same. So we've always kept really good tenure. And it doesn't matter if, one of my counterparts is in Germany and I haven't seen them for 2 years. When I see them, it's like seeing an old friend all over again. And, the one thing about our business is that we've always known how to celebrate very, very well. So we have created a culture that I think is very kind and friendly. And I know some people would look at that and think, oh, as a recruitment business, that doesn't sound particularly inspiring, but it works for us. And I do actually think it's a big reflection of the industry that we work within as well, because, the real estate industry makes up a decent percentage of GDPR in the UK, but the population of people is actually quite small. So you get to know people very, very quickly. So I do think we've become a good mirror of the space that we work in. And it's a big thing for me. I want people to feel like they're part of a valued culture and they can influence that. And I don't think we've ever lost the heart of what Adam and Tim set out Cobalt to be when they set the business up. So it's quite an achievement, I think, for us to have sailed through what we've sailed through and come out the other side of it with that kind of core, that integrity still there at the heart of us.
Love it. Great answer.
Sense.
And I definitely want to get into more about going through the financial crisis and also retaining your culture and that kind of stuff. But you said something earlier I wanted just to explore a bit further, which was about confidence. And you mentioned that like it's been later in your career, more in, say, your 40s, that you have kind of come into your own and felt confident, whereas you said that in your, like when you were younger, you didn't feel that way. So what was the shift? Can you pinpoint a sort of moment or like? Here's what I keep hearing from clients who have switched to Recruiter Flow. They are executing faster, not working longer hours, but using a platform that just makes sense. Recruiter Flow is an AI-first ATS and CRM built specifically for recruitment agencies and executive search firms. No confusing menus, no endless buttons you'll never use. When someone new joins your team, they're up and running in hours, not weeks. And here's the thing. When your recruiters spend less time fighting with software, they spend more time doing what actually matters, having conversations with clients and candidates. Several of our clients at Recruitment Coach have made the switch, and they're telling me it's transforming their operations. If you want to see it in action, book a demo at recruitmentcoach.com/recruiterflow. That's recruitmentcoach.com/recruiterflow.
Yeah, weirdly, I'd say it was probably when we went into the COVID period, because quite honestly, it's been death by 1,000 paper cuts in recruitment, or particularly in the built environment, since about 2009. Like, there's just not been. We were probably at that point, we were recruitment in itself from sort of 2005 through to 2008 was, the appetite was ferocious. I mean, we were growing at a rate as a business, nationally and globally. Our clients were in massive growth mode, and you just couldn't kind of quite keep up with demands. And again, talent's tight in our space, so you've got to be really consultative in what you're doing in order to go out and attract the candidates to move them into the roles that we've obviously been mandated on. And then 2009 happened, and the whole world just kind of went upside down. And I think there was a lot that we needed to do to sort of shape shift and pivot and move with the market and understand what it was going to look like. And it was really hard to do because it was such a protracted recession in the UK. It took quite a while. I was working regionally at that point. I didn't have a national remit. And obviously the heartbeat of a lot of our client bases are based out of London. So the regions were hit. It was really brutal. And, people that I worked with for a long period of time, sort of seeing them being made redundant and applying for roles that were so out of, they shouldn't have been doing those roles. But they needed money. And I think you get to a point where you think you're coming out the other side of it, and then David Cameron falls on his sword and decides that we're going to have a referendum, and you're like, oh my God. So then you go through that, and then you kind of traverse those years, and I still think the economy hadn't kind of quite figured out where it was, what it was doing. Were we in recession? Were we out of it? Where were we going? And then COVID hits, and you're like, Christ almighty, like, is there anything else that could kind of upend this kind of feeling of us getting to a point of recovery and then it kind of going again? And when we got into COVID, we obviously did the sensible thing that, a lot of businesses did. We we looked at the headcount that we had in the UK. We were 55 at that point. We furloughed 45 people. 10 of us stayed working. We did lock down properly, but we were all working from home. And it was only at that point when my then CEO was like, okay, well, we've got these desks. Who's going to pick it up? And I'm like, well, I can cover that, and I can cover that, and I can cover that. And then I realized that actually my joke of me being a jack of all trades and a master of absolutely sweet FA was really coming into its own. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't my best year of billing by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the fact that I felt like I could keep the plate spinning and I was of value to the business, I was just like, Maria, you need to, girl, just have a word with yourself at times and back yourself more. And I think with that, we actually had a big change internally. Our UK MD had decided to leave the business. We moved someone back from our Singapore office that we were closing down at that point, and he came back to be our UK MD. And I have a lot to thank Marcus for, because I think he'd only been back in the country a fortnight, and he said, "Right, I'm promoting you to director." And I was like, wow, like I don't think I'd felt that kind of, I'd been moving up the ranks, but for him to sort of, and bearing in mind he'd been in Singapore, so he'd not been working closely with me in the UK. I was like, that's quite a bold move, I could crash and burn. But I think the fact that he applied the faith in me, and I was already having that kind of mental, have a word with yourself, put yourself in a corner and have a stern talk to yourself. I was like, okay, someone does actually believe that I can do this.
Exactly. That can't be a coincidence. Like which came first? Did you kind of have that word with yourself and start to believe in yourself, and then you got the promotion, or was it the other way around? What was
No,
the timing of that?
it was that came first. There were just points at that year that when we worked through COVID that I was just like, this is hard, but I was doing more internally. I was like leaning across more people. I'd always had good exposure in the business because I was head of Manchester and I was leading the regions, but I felt like there was just a bit more of a natural kind of place for me to elevate. And as a woman, particularly when you're underconfident, I think it's hard, and you try, I don't know if I shape shift to sort of try, and I'm a big people pleaser. So I think I was also, navigating what people were thinking of me, because I always worry how I'm being perceived in terms of what I do and whether it's credible enough, which is just a nonsense, right? When you've worked for as long as you've worked in recruitment, it's very rare that you get people that, nowadays have the level of tenure some of us have had that started in the 90s in recruitment. And
You wouldn't
people,
have lasted that long if you weren't bloody good already,
yeah, I
right?
know. This is what I mean. So I think it was a sort of a gradual realization, but Marcus making that commitment and promoting me was the bit that was like, okay, yeah, Maria, you can do this. Like, just get on with it. And I think that's just how I've continued to sort of apply it. So when Marcus had made the decision to go down a slightly different path last year, and they asked me if I'd like to take the role on as UK MD, I kind of grasped it, really.
Oh, so that's relatively new then.
Yeah, I've been installed since January with no manual, so I'm pretty much learning as I go.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So look, I think going through hard things and coming out the other side does make you stronger, more resilient, more like it. You now have even more evidence to support the idea that, hey, I am good at this and I've got this, right? So all those death by a thousand cuts that, as you described it, kind of, and then coming through each time, and then there's the next challenge, and then you come through that, then that kind of continuous leveling up. Eventually, you've got to start realizing, like you almost, I can relate to this in a way, Maria, that I don't think I'm a natural leader. I kind of, for a long time, I was a solo, like one man band, and I've kind of matured into it in a way, and feel more confident and feel like a leader now that I'm in my early 50s, but it took me a while to kind of get there.
It is tough if you're not a particularly, out there individual. I mean, I'm not an extrovert, I'm not an introvert. I think I'm somewhere in between. And then I think as a woman as well, just sort of going there. Found out at the age of 38 that I was going to struggle to have children. We were trying at the time, and we obviously going through everything that we needed to go through, and it became quite apparent that it just wasn't going to be for us, and that was the way that it was. So to find out that your hormones are through the floor and you've been kicked into perimenopause, which at that point, hadn't sort of really crossed my mind. I'd watched my mum go through it in her early 50s, but it was just the menopause, not everything that kind of comes before it. And I think that didn't help on the confidence side either, because you do feel somewhat of a failure when you realise that you're the problem. And then all the changes that you go through with that journey anyway, if I can call the perimenopause a journey, it's just a box of madness, to be frank. But you're trying to do that whilst holding down a job and navigating something that you're not going to have. And I think all of that, just there's like a perfect storm of things coming together there. And I do think as women, we have a lot to contend with, whether you've reared children or not, and then you kind of navigate in this second phase of your life where you're coming through the other side of your hormones just going AWOL, basically. I think you do hit a point where you're just like, okay, like enough's enough. Like, how am I balancing this and what am I going to do about it? So I think that also played a part in redefining the kind of give less shits attitude and just get on with it. It is not sort of me trying to be stoic in any way, I guess. It's just more an acceptance. And that if I don't back myself in doing this, then what am I doing? I've still got energy in me. I still enjoy recruitment. Like, I love the job. And I'm super proud of the fact that I'm leading a really brilliant team in the UK. I've been given this opportunity. Like, don't fuck it up, Maria. Like, just
Absolutely.
Run with it and try and create a business that people really enjoy being part of and want to be part of and want to succeed with it.
Thank you for sharing that so openly. I think it's because it doesn't get talked about much in the workplace, and I can't obviously relate personally, but I can certainly relate from the point of view of my wife going through her own journey with that. And but it's one thing to know privately what someone's going through, but then in work, you're expected just to have your shit together, right, and get on with it. But this is something you have no control over, what your hormones are doing. What advice do you have for other women who may have either this is coming up or they're in the kind of going through this at the moment, in terms of how to address that from a career standpoint?
Be open about it. Don't hide away from it. It's such a hard thing to navigate. And to be fair, like I know that I've got friends that have had symptoms of the perimenopause that have been far more debilitating than I've had to go through. But don't suffer in silence. Like, talk about it. I think it's just so important, because there are points, I can be midway through a conversation and I will just lose my train of thought and the mind will just cloud over and I'm like, where's that gone? I had a point with that, and you find yourself rambling slightly, and then you're looking at the person on the other side looking at you going, is she losing her mind? Like, what's going on here? And I just think it's so important to open a culture of making people feel like they can talk, or making women feel like they can talk about it. And there's girls in our business that are of an age where they are thinking about families, and it is a natural thing. And if you're not sure and you're going through that process of getting checked out, like, don't feel like you can't talk to your employer about it. Like, I've I know I've had conversations where I've been fairly open about my situation with members of the wider team. And I think, if anything, that's given them the confidence, I'd hope, to be more open about where they are, so that they don't think it's going to affect their career, or they're going to be sort of sidelined for thinking about the fact that they might want a family alongside wanting a career. I don't underestimate how hard it is to balance that when you have it, but I also don't think it should be a blocker for anybody either. And I just think business, it's definitely more in the psyche now. It's a the menopause is talked about a lot more readily in the workplace. Businesses are driving initiatives behind it, but I just think it's just so important that if you are going through that and you're struggling with it, that you seek proper medical advice and go and get the help. And there is plenty of support out there. But also you talk to your employer about where you're at, because there are days when, even I find it now. I'm based in Manchester, or just outside, but I, travel to London fairly frequently. I want to be present down there. It's the head office. I haven't been asked to relocate, thankfully. My, Cobalt have been brilliant at letting me do that sort of dual role where I'm flitting between two offices. But there are days when you've done a long day in London and you get back and you've got to get up the next morning. You're like, oh God, I'm wiped out. Like, I could really do with some time back, but you don't. You just, you go again. And I think, I think it's important that you kind of recognize that in your employees. And so if someone's struggling, then yeah, my best advice would be just have an open conversation, and don't be concerned that people are going to recoil around the table that you're talking to, because it's talent is really good talent is hard to find, and you want to retain people. And the way to do that is to create that culture where people feel like they can be open about where they're at. And at this stage in life, it's so important, because it's not something that just happens in I was 38 and I'm now 50, and I'm still not through the other side of it. So it's a long period of time to be
Absolutely.
navigating that. And like I say, I think I've been fairly lucky with my symptoms, but I know other women out there not so lucky. So
Yeah.
everyone needs as much support as we can give them.
100%. So this is a good segue, Maria, into talking about culture and performance, because you and your leadership team at Cobalt have obviously created a culture where people can have these open conversations. Maybe not everyone feels like they would be supported in that way. And I think maybe some recruitment businesses who are maybe more old school in their thinking might feel like this environment you're describing, which is kind, friendly, celebrating and everything, and where it's supportive, sounds like it's not focused on performance. And yet you guys are one of the top performing recruitment businesses in the world. So obviously these things are compatible. Can you speak to that? Like, A, let's talk about culture and how you guys have created that culture, but B, how you achieve performance as a team.
So I think we have always been, going back to the culture that Adam and Tim created when they first set up the business. It was very much work hard, play hard, but play hard with a big sense of fun, attached to it, and just genuinely enjoying the company of the people that you were out with, celebrating sort of post work. And that has always remained. I mean, everybody works exceptionally hard. We do have, I guess, from a marker of, judging performance, we are KPI driven, but it's low level KPIs. And I've always been a big proponent of, it. You can measure against KPIs to a degree, but the reality of it is, none of our desks operate in the same way within the business. We work across a wide cross section of the built environment. So it's important to recognize that every single desk has its own nuances in terms of performance. So we have desks literally that are maybe a bit more back office orientated, or they are sort of site based roles where you can turn your pipeline around quite quickly. A couple of those desks could literally come into the month with a very thin sort of layer of jobs, but those couple of jobs, they can turn really quickly. Their interview processes go and they can be brought in NFI within like a 4-week stretch. My space in the general practice market or certain facets of what we do in development and construction, those processes take longer. They can be sort of 6 to 12 weeks in terms of trying to turn a mandate around for a client. So I think for me, we've always had the KPIs in back of mind, and there is a method to the madness in terms of how we're projecting where our fee income is going to come from. But equally, it's about giving the consultants the autonomy to say, this is your desk, you own it, you become the expert in this space, and therefore you need to be recognizing what you have to do day in, day out across the course of a month to hit the targets that you've got from an NFI point of view. And I think the measure of that works well for us. I just think it's a sensible approach to take. Like we're interviewing people and I'll be talking to them about, I remember speaking to a couple of girls that we hired back in the summer, and they both come from the same organization. I was talking to them about their KPIs and they were like, well, we had to hit 250 calls a week, and we had to do half of them to clients and half of them to candidates. And I was like, well, where are your meetings? When are you meeting these clients? When are you meeting these candidates? Like, how are they judging the quality of the job that you're doing or the talent that you're putting into that job and where the pitfalls are? And they were like, no, we didn't do that. And I'm like, the hell, like, what is going on? So I think I've always ran at it from a point of, what's the cycle of your week going to look like this week? If you are particularly job heavy right now, like, where are we at with these jobs? Is that a job that we're going to fill? What's the client saying to you? Are they beauty parading or are they genuine? So in a long-winded way, what I'm trying to say is I think it's more consultative with the consultants and how they're working with their clients to understand exactly whether this is genuine. We can work on that mandate, we can fill it. And then, we're out there sort of finding the new threads of work to come through, or they're in a period whereby actually they've closed a lot of the roles off that they've been working to. Now we're kind of geeing up and we're doing the business development side. And I guess the learning thing for me right now is trying to get the sales floor into that balance of keeping half that eye on the continued BD side whilst making sure that they're working with those existing clients, because we've got a brilliant suite of repeat business clients where we probably have let ourselves down over the past few years is not being as proactive as we could be from a new client generation point of view. So, I feel like it's always a continual cycle of development, which is probably not the answer I was supposed to give you for that.
The recruitment game has changed. There's more competition than ever, more noise, and in many markets, job vacancies have dropped dramatically. If you're working harder than ever but earning less, I want you to know that it's not your fault. The methods that used to work just aren't delivering like they used to. So I've created a free training. It's called How Top Recruiters Are Winning New Clients Even in a Tough Market. Inside, I'll walk you through a 9-step system that's helped over 800 recruitment business owners build predictable pipeline and land premium retained clients consistently. You'll learn how to stop chasing, start leading, and get paid what you're worth. Register now at recruitmentcoach.com/clients. No, that's good. There's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, NFI stands for net fee income, for those who are not familiar with that term, and which essentially, I tend to use the word GP to mean roughly the same thing. And when I say GP, I'm not talking about the accounting definition of GP, where you remove all your direct costs, et cetera. Basically, we're talking about billings, right? And now, are you guys permanent, or do you do contract, or is it both?
We are 80% perm and about 20% contract, but obviously contract is an area that I'm looking to grow and get us back to take us to being sort of more of that 50-50 approach on the contract versus perm.
So to me, in simple terms, when it pertains to recruitment business, GP I use synonymously with NFI. Our American clients don't use NFI, so that's why I use GP, because everyone understands that. But it's really all of your permanent billings plus if you do contract, it's the margin,
Yeah.
right? If you add those together, that's net fee income. And it sounds like you run a 360 model. Does everyone run
We
a full
do.
desk or? Okay.
Yeah, they do. We have got a couple of people in the business that do 180 or 270, which is not something that we would discourage either, because I think there's an absolute value and place for them in our business. But at the moment, because we're growing, we're focused on hiring people that can do more of that 360, because it's, from a ramp up point of view, you want people that can come in and hit the ground running as much as you feasibly can when you're kind of getting your head around the built environment.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then do you guys do retained or is it mostly contingent or what? How does
So
that
we
work?
used to do a lot of retained. We were brilliant at doing retained, and I would say we were a 50-50 split pre sort of 2009. And then because the market changed the way that it changed, and recruitment, particularly in the real estate space, just fell off a cliff, we reverted back, I think, to being more contingent led, for the fact that it was a role. There was a role. So you would want to go, you'd want to fill it, and then you just want to kind of re-enable that cycle of the business coming through. So we're going through a bit of a learning curve at the moment about sort of re-educating the consultants on what retainers look like and where we should be pushing for more of the retain work, because it's great. It's great work to work on, and I think when you're looking at the cycle of your quarter, as we tend to sort of look at it over a quarterly period rather than monthly, being able to plan for where your money is coming from. You get a retainer in and you know that you've got that money. If you're not doing a shortlist in the middle, you're definitely bookending it with your upfront and your completion. It works better on some desks in our business than it would on others, but certainly we've hired someone really, really strong. We work in the real estate debt space, so we brought an experienced hire in at the start of this year, who's been sector agnostic but wanted to specialize a little bit more in real estate, and he's really pushing the envelope for us at the moment on the retain side, and it excites me to see it happening, because it's like, okay, brilliant, I do have somebody in the business now that is going out and executing more of this work, and that can speak to the sales floor. Do you know what I mean? They can see that, and then they can see the size of deals that he's doing or the mandates that he's winning, and it's like, oh, how are you doing that? So it's like, okay, we can use this. We can use this in a really good way to encourage more people to be thinking about it when they're going into those client conversations.
100% that success story. Then other people realize it is possible, and there's a role model for that. So yeah, we strongly encourage our clients to shift to more retained rather than contingent for so many reasons, which we don't need to get into here. I think most people can appreciate, and so it's something that I'm a big believer in. So I just wanted to have a bit more context about the business. So then thinking about, there's two things you talked about with performance. One was hard work. Everyone works really hard. And the other was you do have KPIs, but sounds like they're tailored to each desk rather than everybody has the exact same KPIs. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. So the hard work one is, I think everyone listening knows that success in recruitment is directly related to hard work. Now, of course, you can work smarter, you can, leverage technology, automation, and so on. But ultimately, fundamentally, willingness to do the work is going to be an indicator of longevity in this business. But something I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs is it's hard to find people who are willing to work hard. How are you guys identifying at an interview stage whether someone is that kind of, it fits that mold or not?
I think we've got better over the years at identifying that. I think before, a lot of our interview processes were quite culturally focused, which, we were getting good people, and they were genuinely, they were Cobalt people. So they were fitting into the culture really well. But then, the work ethic might slide at a point. But because of the way that we operated from a cultural point of view, we probably find those conversations to maybe exit them harder than most other businesses would. So I think we've just become a lot more robust in our interview processes. And I do. It's hard in the real estate space because we do have a number of competitors. There's so many more now than there was when I first started out. And you're not always going to get someone moving from a competitor, particularly some of the guys that have been trading for the length of time that Cobalt have, and we've been trading for 23 years. There are other businesses out there that have been trading for a similar, if not longer, period of time. And they've got good tenure as well. So we're not always going to be able to take from sort of direct competition. So for me, we've got a brilliant person internally, Imi, who does all our internal talent hiring. We've invested in that internally because we know it's important. Setting her up to sort of push the envelope a little bit in terms of really interrogating people's billings and how they've got to where they've got to, and whether they've actually originated those deals themselves, or if it's been, if they've been doing a bit more of a 180, but they're not quite sort of revealing that on the CV, but you're seeing this, super background. And we've just got better, I think, at interrogating that and actually asking for proof of billings, which seemingly no one does anymore.
Really? Wow, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I don't know. Maybe it's just unique and it's something that we're seeing, but I think we've had it with a couple of people that have maybe then fallen away from an interview process when we've kind of pushed on that. Others have been very open about doing it and happy to do so. But I just think it's so important because you want to be able to set somebody up in the right way. And I think we've normally, during our onboarding processes, allow people just to sort of settle in over the first 3 months. Whereas it's like, no, come on, this isn't your first rodeo. You've done this job before. You might not have worked in real estate, and there's an education piece on our side, and that's on us to make sure that we're setting them up in the best way possible to understand the market they're coming into. But if they're crossing over from somewhere else, they understand the fundamentals of recruitment. They know how to do the job. So it's just about getting them running as quickly as possible.
Great. Okay, so a couple of things to ask about there. Yeah, before I became a trainer and coach, I recruited salespeople, and it's just normal to ask for evidence of someone's track record. Show me like your pay slips, if they have league tables or awards they've won or any of that kind of stuff. So if someone's good, they're going to be able to evidence success, right? But it sounds like, is your strategy hiring experienced recruiters, but maybe from other sectors and then training them in real estate or?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to, because, a couple of our desks, it's just incredibly hard to, as I said, leverage that talent from competition if they're being fairly well looked after and, they're in the thick of a good year. You're building that part, why are you going to move away from it? So we have had to bring people in and train them. And actually, one of the girls that works closest with me in Manchester, she came, 4 years recruitment experience, had never worked in real estate, had been working a US market from the UK. I think she joined in. When she joined it, she was like, what is this? Like, what is your market? Because I'd be talking to, and I sometimes forget, I've been doing it the length of time that I've been doing it. So I will, rattle off what a surveyor is or the different myriads of surveyors, and she'd be just like, Maria, you could be talking Irish, like gibberish to me right now, like I've got no idea what you're saying. So I think she found the learning curve hard, steep. The recruitment piece, fine, but the actual nuances of what we do, or what our clients do, I should say, not what we do, it's been a big challenge for her. But she's come into her second year now, sorry, and she's having one of the best years. She's having her strongest year since her first year and a half of being in. And I know that there were times that she did actually question whether she'd made the right decision, but I'm like, you've just got to give it this time. So I always try and impart, like, be patient.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we would like you to bill, but if it doesn't happen within the first 3 months or not the first 6 months, but you're getting there. As long as we can see that you're doing what we are asking you to do,
Right.
we know that it will come. So there's probably a bit more belief on our side that we can get people to the point that we want to get them to. And it's happening less, I'd say, that people aren't getting to that point with us.
That's awesome. So this circles back then to KPIs, which I wanted to ask you about, because obviously when someone's first starting, you can't evaluate them based on billings because, it sometimes takes 3 months or maybe even 6 months to get up and running. But so all you can really look at is attitude and activity. Are they, and improvement, I guess, right? So you said that the KPIs do vary because there's nuances in each desk, but what are the main things that you're looking at?
Generally, it is, we have them that they run across the board. So it's, you are looking at jobs added, interviews, CVs, speculative CVs, client calls, candidate calls, client meetings, candidate meetings. I'd say they're the kind of the key 7 that we would work across. But for me, you have that as a baseline, but the bit that I will always look at on a one-to-one is like that job pipeline. So, normally, particularly if someone's entering the real estate desk that I still recruit in, and obviously run a team within, it's about how they're building that job pipeline. So there's a given, there's always something that we'll be able to pass over as a warm job to get them started. So it's throwing them into something and then seeing how they build and work with that in the hope that they would do a placement there. So it will get that kind of, I guess, monkey off their back that they are going to actually do a deal, and give them that confidence that, okay, right, we can move on to the next. And then it's how they're exploring the client base and the wider market and sort of spotting the obvious signs of, what their clients are doing when, having those conversations, going and meeting them, finding out what the hiring patterns are looking like, talking to them about where we've had successes with them in the past. It's kind of all of that you're building in. So sorry, I'm probably not answering this very well.
No, it's fine.
It's more about how that helps them build up that job pipeline than it is about, have you spoken to, 100 clients this week? Because it's just,
Right.
that's a nonsense. It's
okay.
I was listening to the podcast earlier this week, and you had a guy on called Ollie Scott,
Yes.
who talked about becoming an industry expert in that creative space that he works in. And I really resonated with that because I feel like I am a real estate expert. I'm not a recruiter, I'm a real estate expert. It's probably an unfair thing for me to level on anyone that comes into the business if they've not been used to working in real estate, but it's the aspiration that I'd like them to get to, so that they're really immersed in the sector. They understand it. They know what their clients are talking about. They understand how the economics of the industry works, so that they can, you have to pivot within our space. You can't kind of stay within the same lane all the time because our clients are constantly having to pivot and think about how they're going to attain the results that they want to retain. So I'm always interested in people that are genuinely excited by that. And I know not everybody is. But I think if you can sell that, and I do think that we do sell that quite well to anybody coming into the business, then once they're here, they can see, with some of the real success stories we've had in our business with people that have been with us sort of 10 plus years that are really good billers, proven billers as well, and have a really good standing in the industry. They can see that there's actually a career here.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than it just being a quick way to make cash, because recruitment ain't a quick way to make cash anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's really interesting. Because you rattled off initially all the kind of standard KPIs, but then you zoomed in on really the business development side of things. I interviewed a guy, Tom Hopkinson, a while back, he has renewable energy as their space globally and UK-based business, and he sold the firm for $32 million.
Wow.
In a trade sale, but his first deal was actually selling half his shares to a PE firm. And they told him, Tom, you've got too many KPIs. Like, what are the key KPIs? So then he had this because if you're targeting, you definitely want to measure everything, right? Because then you have that data you can look at if you need to. But if you give people too many things to target, then really they have no focus, right? So we need to have a maximum of 3 key KPIs, key KPIs to really focus on. And you're saying for you, it's like job pipeline. So that's new jobs and client
Jobs,
meetings?
CVs, meetings, interviews, I think would be my main ones. I mean, interestingly, what we do really well, I'd say, with the data that we have is that we will look at how people are managing their job activity. So, at the moment, we've noticed that our closing rate's not particularly great in certain areas. So, okay, and then you kind of dial that back and go, so what is it that you're struggling with when it comes to closing? And then you realize that it could be a combination of candidate control or even client control. And that's the bit that you want to be working with somebody on to help them to help them get the confidence to see how they can build a natural pipeline that means that they are billing every single month. It's looking into all those bits. It's just not as, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel in any way, shape or form. What we do is quite straightforward. It's, contingency recruitment, exclusive mandates. You're matching a client with a candidate for that particular need, but there are nuances around that in terms of how you manage that process, and that people control is key to the success of it. And it's also being able to recognize whether this is a genuine mandate or is a client, beauty parading. And a lot of clients are doing that at the moment because they're slightly nervous about making that commitment to hiring. Because let's face it, it's not, hiring people is not cheap at the minute, particularly with NI inflation in the UK. That has made clients think, do I just stretch the people base that I have at the moment, or do I really, continue with that plan and put that extra per head in? Like, can we afford to do that against where we might be from a fee generation point of view within our client base? So, it's
makes sense. And quality of jobs that we're working, how real are they? In fact, I'll send this to you. I'm sure you have something similar, Maria, but we have a job order matrix or scorecard that I encourage all our clients, don't work any job until you've actually given it a score. And we have criteria, things like urgency, commitment, accept access to the hiring manager and so on. And you come up with a score, and then you're able to see how if you have multiple jobs that you're working, which hopefully you do, how they rank as far as, the likelihood of success. And every time we do that exercise, even with very experienced recruiters, they always go, oh, why am I'm working on stuff I shouldn't really be working on, or I'm putting too much effort behind it. By the way, so if you're listening and you want to see our job order scorecard, just reach out to us, connect at recruitmentcoach.com, and we'll share that with you. Maria, there's so many things I could ask you, but we're out of time. So one final question is, in terms of that confidence piece, looking back, if you could have a conversation with Maria Sinclair earlier in her career, from the perspective that you have now, what advice would you have for her?
Just put your big girl pants on and do it. It's probably the only thing I could think about saying to her. I think that would just back yourself more. I think it's just so important. And I think that's why, for me, it's important that from a cultural point of view, businesses give people the confidence that they are being backed and recognizing that. And that's not to make it, sound like this sort of utopia cultural place that's unattainable. But I think there are little things you can do every day to make people feel wanted and part of a business. And I think that's so super important. And I just wish I'd recognized that a bit earlier on than I did.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So as an employer, there's things that we can do, but ultimately it sounds like you kind of have to back yourself first, and then other people will also back you. Maria, there's been a lot of fun. Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. Sorry for the swearing.
Don't worry. Have a great day.
And you. Thank you.
Okay, let me give you my top 1 or 2 takeaways from that interview. First of all, I found it super interesting that Maria does not have sort of standard KPIs that apply to every individual. Instead, she drives performance by focusing on job quality and pipeline strength. So she looks at how consultants manage each mandate, whether the client is genuinely committed, and where control is breaking down. The other thing that really stood out to me is how Maria creates a supportive environment by encouraging honest conversations about what people are really dealing with. Maria talked about how important it is for employees to be open about challenges like perimenopause and to get support instead of struggling alone. That openness builds trust and ultimately increases performance. What was the biggest takeaway or light bulb moment from this interview for you? I'd love to hear your feedback either via the YouTube comments or in the LinkedIn comments for this episode. Please hit subscribe and I'll see you next time.